Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And, I think that we really should start this week off the way that we start all the good weeks off, in which case I think that means we have like one good week so far. And that's with what you're drinking. Because I've got a fun polar seltzer this week. I've got a fucking...
Now,
I got that new hotness.
New hotness. There's a new hotness in the world of polar seltzer?
Yeah. Fucking time to talk about the newest flavors in the polar world.
Okay.
I was shopping at the local grocery
right.
and came across this series of long boy cans. These are the tall cans.
Of polar?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that existed.
It's the limited edition flavors, baby. This is from the winter collection.
Wait. I knew it was going to be a winter thing. Can I guess? Yes.
If you guess this, then I will just end the stream, and that's the end of the episode for the week.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't want you to end it, so I guess I can't guess it.
No, go ahead and guess. I want to see if you can do it.
Well, you said it's a winter collection, right? So, what would translate to... What's like a wintry treat that would translate to a polar seltzer? Now, the obvious answer is like candy cane, right? Like,
yeah, that would be. I mean, they do have a mint offering in their line, so that they have experimented with minty flavors before,
right? But I don't want to go for the obvious answer because that's it's too easy. And I don't think they would do the obvious thing because, I don't know how well candy cane actually translates to, the polar brand, to polar flavors. I will say it translates well to tea. We have a candy cane tea that Jules picked up that's, actually that
really
sounds
fucking good.
I do like that. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is Christmas dinner ham.
Mm-hmm. It's the hot ham water.
It's the hot ham?
Yeah. No. It is not ham. It is not a ham dinner.
It's a fruit cake.
There is fruit involved. You are on the right path.
Okay.
But it's not a fruit cake flavor. It is pomegranate champagne.
Now, what about that constitutes what is the wintry holiday theming there? Is this something that baby Jesus partook in, or?
The thing that people forget is after Jesus turned water into wine, he carbonated it and made it pomegranate champagne.
Okay.
That's part of, so it's become part of the official drink of Jesus Christ.
I didn't know.
I
didn't know about that.
Pomegranate is like a winter fruit.
It is?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. All right.
Or at least pomegranate flavored shit.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah. They just had pomegranates at the store that I went to. I don't know why I'm not saying it. Why I'm I can't look. I go to the secret grocery stores that I can't say the names of on this podcast.
Walmart.
Yeah. And no, they had a basket of pomegranates by the front door with the apple ciders and shit.
Ooh.
So.
Oh, yeah. That sounds delicious. I'm just drinking water. Yeah. I'm not drinking anything super exciting.
Can you get at least get a straw and blow some bubbles into it or something
right now?
Yeah, can you make that shit bubbly?
Okay.
Man, I'm glad this is the week that I got you a fucking windscreen for your microphone.
Yeah.
That would have been terrible.
We did upgrade. I said
Yeah.
this on my stream over the weekend, but I want to say this also to the listeners now. We did upgrade my recording situation where I have this windscreen, this filter, and I have this nice new podcasting arm. Neither of which would exist if it weren't for the fact that people are donating to us on Patreon. So thank you all so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it. Like, this is the thing that we do like once a year, is like we upgrade a couple things in our arsenal with Patreon money, and that's so crazy to me. So thank you.
Yeah. So if you want to know where all that goes, that's it goes into making it hopefully the podcast better to listen to.
Yeah.
Now, and also other ways you can support the show. I do believe we have some emails this week.
We do have some emails. I have one quick one that I wanted to bring up. Episode 385, listener questions. So if you haven't listened to episode 385, this one might not make a lot of sense, but if you have, you'll know what they're talking about. This email is from Amber, and it just says, Texas dry rub was bad, man. So
boom, roasted.
so,
yeah,
kind of
look,
very
I asked
short
a
and
simple
sweet.
question, I got a simple answer.
Right.
It was bad,
And that's
Good to know.
okay. Sometimes keeping it simple, what I always say is keep it simple, stupid. And I've always called that the KISS method. And I can't recommend keeping it simple enough, frankly.
Yeah, like there was a time that you just ran into high school and you're like, I got my first kiss, and then I was like, oh, who'd you smooch? And you're like, what do you mean who? What are you talking about? I'm talking about.
What are you talking about? I was just talking about a methodology I developed.
Yeah.
So, we do have one other email that I think is a good little springboard for today's episode.
Okay.
We got another email from David, which, look, if you people out there want to hear from people other than Weird John and David, you better start emailing us more often. Okay? That's all I'm going to say.
Or I will say, if you try to contact us through Facebook messages, I get there's some people that have burned the usage of Facebook messages for me for the podcast account.
Yeah.
Because they just incessantly give me look, when you're dealing in the world of weird, you do get a mix of people that are into the content. And there have been some very very nice but intense people that have tried to talk to me on Facebook Messenger.
Yeah,
I'm a little less active on there.
I don't want to look, the most aggressive people I've found in messaging us are super soldier truthers, which that's cool, I guess. But they're always very earnestly oh my God, I want you to tell the super soldier story on your show. And it's like, yo, I don't know if you listened to our episode about Andy Perro, where we did episodes or any subsequent episode where we updated that with the fact that he was arrested for murder. I don't know if those people are actually listening to us or just coming across us while Googling Super Soldier Real, Super Soldier Andy Perro Real. Yeah. So that's where we get it from the most, it seems, which is interesting.
I guess we should just abide by we're really abiding by the old catchphrase of make niche podcasts, get niche listeners.
That's true. That is a good point.
So,
and I will just say, and then there's nothing wrong with niche listeners, really.
No,
but
it's great.
What I will say for the people who send us a million messages on the same topic, there's a methodology that I developed for this idea, and that's KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. So check that out. But no, we have another email from David.
Okay.
Who has emailed us a couple times before, but always with something interesting to say. So, I appreciate it. I don't want to belittle David and be like, David, stop fucking emailing us. David, you send so many emails. David, what's with all the fucking emails? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything like, oh my God, David keeps fucking emailing us. I'm not saying that.
Not at all.
No, this is an interesting one. So David says, thanks again for another shout out on the pod. Another great one, and as always, you have opened one more portal into a seemingly endless rabbit hole of grifters, CIA assets, and fraudsters from the 1970s and beyond. But seriously, the 1970s did seem to produce an extraordinary number of these individuals and a frightening number of federally funded studies involving intelligence agencies. It only makes one wonder if they were, in fact, working with the Smirch of Smileology's publishing department in order to sell books as a side hustle. I'll leave that to the diehard conspiracy theorists to speculate about, but I did dig up a couple interesting factoids just in case you missed them. There's a whole lot going on with the subject, so here we go. I would encourage you to read one of Ingo Swann's many papers, this one entitled Scientological Techniques, A Modern Paradigm for the Exploration of Consciousness and Psychic Integration. Side note, I did skim this, but it made my brain hurt trying to to read that. I think I know what they're about to get into here, but I did try and read that, and it was just, there's a part in the Ingo Swann stuff where I'm just look, I can't get deep into his techniques because it's a lot.
Yeah, you got to study the tomes for a while before you can get in on that one.
Yeah.
You know.
But here's what it says. A quick excerpt from this paper states that, quote, the end point of the Dianetic and Scientology rehabilitative processes is considered to be the ability to be conscious and causal in any desired direction of activity, and thus has implications for the development of alternative future histories in which psychoenergetic factors may play an increasing role. Which that is an interesting little excerpt from that particular paper. Dave goes on to say, my take on this entire group of people, whether they were involved directly in intelligence gathering or not, is that they were using the techniques developed by Hubbard and his crew in order to draw in people from the intelligence community so that they could receive federal funding for their activities, which for me is that's, I would put that in a basket of I could see that.
Yeah.
Right. When I was reading that stuff, I got that vibe occasionally. But obviously there's no way to know if that's absolutely what happened. But the email goes on. Whether it worked or not is certainly up for debate, as the Smirch of Smileology has an extremely effective and efficient records keeping, alteration, and destroying operation at its disposal, billions of dollars to work with, and the support of a lot of people who seem to be above the law, at least in the sense that they can do things that the average person would never even consider themselves capable of getting away with. The list of names associated with the people we are talking about has grown and continues to grow in the modern UFO and alternative studies movement, so I guess you guys were correct. The well will never dry up. Good pod, fellas. I can't wait to see what you dig up for the next one. Peace, Dave. Dave, thank you. That's the kind of shit. That's yeah, what you're describing there is kind of my takeaway. Obviously you can't say that definitively, but it's what it feels like at times, right? It is a weird, It's very weird, all the Scientology connections there and all the fucking money that was getting just poured into that project. And as we get into Uri Geller, we have another story about this stuff, about the Stanford Research Institute and the psychic experiments. And this episode, we're going to actually get into touch on his involvement. You even get another tidbit that sort of pushes you in another different direction about why, how the funding came to be and all this stuff. But we'll get into that. So,
okay.
Last week, in part one of our Uri Geller coverage, we mostly discussed his early life, which was him discovering his incredible psychic powers, an encounter with what may have been an alien in this Arab glen or whatever, this garden, and his time fighting in the IDF, which he doesn't tell a lot of people about this garden that he encountered the alien in, especially in his early life. And so, yeah, this week we're going to continue to talk about his life after getting discharged from the IDF, after leaving the IDF after getting injured, and what he claims his life was like and what others say he was up to after digging into his history. So here I have a little story about what he was up to after the injury during the 6-Day War, which again is... It's the weird thing where he talks about killing a Jordanian man and how he was that bolstered his love of Israel ideology, which again is I feel murder shouldn't be associated with that, with any sort of notion of love. But again, this is like a nation state, like an ethno state we're talking about. So, yeah. So here's what I got from your Uri Geller website. Here's what it says. As Uri recovered from his arm wounds, he was sent to a rehabilitation center. Here, the young people of Israel came each day to entertain and help the wounded. A young girl of 16, Hannah, came twice a week to the center. Uri was shyly attracted to her. She was a slender, medium-sized girl with flashing blue eyes and honey blonde hair. Joy seemed to bubble out of her, and she was always laughing. Uri began to date her. A side note, if you go to his website and start reading his story about things, there's a bunch of really boring details that I had to wade through. For instance, I know about when he lost his virginity. That's kind of fun.
Oh, really?
For me. Yeah, I know about that.
He just has that like on his website?
It's in, well, okay, so like his website, and I'm about to explain this a little bit more, but his website hosts text from his autobiography called My Story. Okay. And in his autobiography, he talks about losing his virginity. And a lot of really painful, boring stuff like that. But it goes on. Part of Uri's rehabilitation program was serving as a counselor at a summer camp for teenage boys. One of his charges was a 12-year-old boy whose name was Shimshon, but everyone called him Shippy. Shippy was tall and thin with an intense stork-like head. His mother called him Gandhi with affection. He always seemed to be sniffing and sensing the air around him. He was powerfully attracted to the tall, lean paratrooper with the bandaged arms. He hung around Uri so much that Uri could not ignore him. One evening after dinner, Uri discovered that Hannah was Shippy's sister. What these three had in common was an endless round of practical jokes. The laughter never ceased when they were together. When they were apart, each one noticed how quiet it was because no one else stimulated them to laughter. Uri looked upon Shippy and Hannah as the brother and sister he had never had, which is a little weird since he's dating her and she's also 16.
There's that. There are multiple things in that's a little weird. But, yeah.
One day, Uri was moved to tell Shippy about the watch hands. He showed Shippy how he could move a watch's hands without touching the watch. Shippy did not laugh. He believed Uri implicitly. Uri had not done the watch trick for years. He noticed that he didn't need a lot of kids around now. He wondered why it was so easy to do when Shippy was around. The summer ended. Shippy and Hannah had to return to school. Uri was assigned to duty tracing army deserters all over Israel. So by the end of 1968, he was honorably discharged from active duty and now faced civilian life, but all he knew were some languages and soldering. I find it another really weird tidbit in his life that like part of his time serving the IDF was finding deserters, like hunting them down, basically. Just a strange blip.
Well, especially because, then he would come home from hunting those people down to his high school girlfriend.
Right. Who, yeah, exactly.
And pick her up from school. Yeah.
So, Uri found a job as an export manager for a textile firm in Tel Aviv. This fancy title meant that he got the purchase orders from abroad written in English, Greek, or Hungarian and filled the orders. Life was dull. He saw Hannah and Shippy when their school time permitted. He was restless. To make some more money, he found he could take assignments as a photographer's model, which, by the way, yes, Uri Geller was briefly a model.
Interesting.
So
okay.
That was the thing that he did. In October 1969, Shippy begged Uri to come to his school and do his tricks for his class. Uri reluctantly agreed when the teacher also invited him and promised to pay him £15. Uri appeared in the small school auditorium for his first public appearance. He had watched entertainers in the army, and he had a feeling for what to say. Once on the stage, he pretended that he was addressing Shippy, and everything then proceeded smoothly. He had children draw pictures and numbers on the blackboard, and while blindfolded, he would guess what they had written. Once he got started, it just seemed to go on and on without effort. He went on doing his tricks for 3 hours. Everyone was enchanted, including the teacher. Uri had no idea of how he did his tricks, quote unquote. They just came forth spontaneously and naturally without his ever having done them or practiced them before. But Shippy was the one who was the most proud. He kept telling Uri how great he was and that he should go on the stage. In the next few months, Shippy went around the neighborhood telling everybody what a genius Uri was. So now, in addition to his job as export manager, Uri was doing modeling work and demonstrating in homes and at private parties. During the shows, he enjoyed being in front of people, but as soon as his show was over, he had to retreat. He couldn't enjoy being close to people, except for Hannah and Shippy. By January 1970, he was getting small notices in the newspapers for his telepathic and mind-over-matter feats. In March 1970, he was approached by a theatrical manager who advised him to quit his job and become a full-time entertainer. The manager was persuasive, and Uri did his first professional stage show in a movie theater, Kolnoa in Bat Yam.
Do you think that he had a... Wait, you haven't seen this movie, but you've seen the meme, though, the Elvis Presley movie, the Baz Luhrmann movie from this year, where they're playing. This guy runs up and plays the song for Tom Hanks
Cruise?
in really crazy makeup, and the punchline of the scene that is used as a meme is that the guy that's singing this song that's so soulful and great is that he tells Tom Hanks that he's white, and Tom Hanks just goes, "He's what?" And it's so I'm imagining what the moment of that for Uri Geller with this entertainment where some guy's comes up, guys, you gotta see this guy. He's bending spoons and changing clocks with his mind.
Your kids, you might not get it now, but your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I just want to see what movie, what that scene looked like.
I really don't know. I haven't seen what you're talking about, but that
shit! I'll send the clip to you after this episode.
It sounds batshit enough
funny
for me to maybe I should watch that movie because that sounds really insane.
Okay, here's my fucking. I've seen Elvis.
Okay, the live or
no. I have seen the Baz Luhrmann film Elvis from this year. And it's fun. It is a fun movie biopic. It's not the most special thing in the world, but Baz Luhrmann's movies are visually fun to watch, even if they're so slick it's ridiculous. It's so heavy production, but it's
real.
all in process of every shot being a fucking spectacle.
Yeah.
And so it's fun, especially it's fun to watch. It's not the most even-handed telling of anything, but it's a fun movie.
I have had zero thoughts about I have had exactly one thought about that movie, actually. When the trailer came out, I watched the trailer and I was like, this looks stupid, and I'd never thought about it again.
It's fair.
But hearing that sounds really funny, so maybe I would watch it. I also
it's an entertaining time, and they do recreate the fucking the microphone.
I was about to say
in the movie.
I heard that they recreated Elvis's weird fucking thing where he deep throats a microphone, which I don't know what that's about.
I can tell you what it's about. It's actually kind of sad, but it's
drug related or something, I'm guessing.
No, it's that was in his kind of, yes, but towards the end of his life, he was locked into this Las Vegas contract that basically made him perform there nonstop all the time, over and over for years at be basically unable to break out of this.
Yeah.
And so that is when he's at the lowest point of post major success throughout his life and everything. He's shackled to this casino, just doing the same thing every night and so fucked up and depressed.
Yeah.
And on drugs and everything, that's the low point at the end of his life. So
he decides to gag himself just to feel something.
So he's basically just gives no flying fucks at all about what he's doing on stage. He does not care at that point at all, and is just fucking around. Look, and
that is sad. And his the end of his life sucks. But that clip makes me laugh. I have to admit, it's very funny.
It's still funny. It still is.
And kudos to him, because that's a funny thing to do if you don't give a fuck about what you're doing on stage. So
yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, he's convinced by this guy to start being this performer, and 2 months later he becomes a hit. Now one of the frustrating things about Uri Geller's life story is that it's been told by a few different people. So we have Uri himself, who wrote that autobiography called My Story, which I didn't even like look. I should have looked when this was published, but I don't think it was published like recently. I think it's been like maybe 30 plus years since that actually was published. So it's like I didn't find a lot of information about his relationship with the Stanford Research Institute. Like a lot of that stuff would come out a lot more later after it was, declassified in 95. So I think that this autobiography is pre 95. So,
Okay. So this is not a like brand spanking new book.
yeah.
This is
And like, there's like the paper that was put out by the SRI guys about their experiments with him. So like some of it was public, but then other aspects weren't, and especially the fact that it was CIA funded was not public.
yeah.
So yeah, we have Uri's like own account, which is in that book, and it's on his website and stuff that he said in the documentary that I watched, and blah blah blah. But then we also have like people who are believers of Uri's supernatural abilities who have written about him. And then we have like hardline skeptics like the amazing Randy who are writing about him and digging into his story. Now, something that I discovered was that the stuff that I was reading as his like life story off of his website actually is just the text from a biography of Geller written by somebody named Andrea Puharich,
Okay.
who was a parapsychologist and a Geller stan. We're going to get into him shortly. But so the point being is like the stuff that I've been talking about, I thought for a minute was Geller telling the story. But it's not. But it's taken from somebody who is close with him. And I've noticed occasional little details differing between Geller's telling of it and Puharich's. Puharich. I have no idea how to say that name, to be honest. I know it's like an itch at the end, but it's a weird name. And I think that Puharich's telling is like predates Geller's autobiography by a little bit. But bafflingly, the text of both versions are hosted on Geller's personal website, which is not especially well organized. In fact, one of the really funny things about Geller's site is that most of the time, if it uses information from what would essentially be an external source, like an online article from like the BBC, right? It'll just copy paste the text from the article onto the site and say like from BBC article, blah, 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 written by blah, blah, blah. It just, so to me, I think that's a little bit of an SEO thing for him.
Yeah, I can see that.
So he'll just like whole cloth, like copy these things. But then there's a couple spots where the website will just straight up link to other weird things. One of which is there's a link to the Black Vault, which is like a bunch of stuff that was acquired through the Freedom of Information Act. But then he also at one point for I think his link to the quote unquote timeline of the CIA's interest in psychic research, he straight up links to notorious weirdo conspiracy website that we all know and love, Bibliotheca Pleiades.
Okay, yeah, that's the archive. We love it.
It's so weird though, like because it's just such a bizarre choice. Ultimately, I guess I'm just like making excuses for why I didn't realize I was getting two different tellings of Geller's life story for a while there, that were just kind of happening side by side the way I was like discovering them. Anyway, autobiographical stuff. It comes from Geller's book, My Story, and it was here that I read Geller's slightly different account, which is mostly the same, but notably, Hannah is 19 in his account, not 16. Which I thought was kind of interesting.
That is the difference, yeah.
So, but yeah, the story is basically the same. Part of his rehabilitation after getting injured in the war involved working with kids at this camp. And this chance encounter with his young friend Shippy and these performances seem to set him on this path. Certain accounts also make mention of Uri and Shippy, I guess, getting really interested in a book of magic tricks and stories of magicians, which like stage magic, which inspired their early attempts at entertaining. And by all accounts, he did become pretty famous in Israel in the early 1970s. And I guess Shippey and Hannah were there as his friends for his like meteoric rise to fame. And while Uri's version of the story and the story that's Purich is like, they're both sprinkled with these sort of fantastical bits. He basically says that like he is doing these, he's using his psychic powers to sort of help create these performances. And, you know, a bunch of magicians who have explored his story basically say, well, he was generally doing your typical magician shtick with the psychic stuff thrown in as extra flavoring, basically.
Because I was literally just about to ask, like, do you have any idea how, like, what his stage show was like at that point? And it sounds like you've got basically that it is your stereotypical magician show, but then you have like some of the spoon stuff,
right,
and his kind of like that kind of stuff in there.
Like imagine if who's the guy who was like in the 2000s, like everybody loved to like make fun of him because he
David Blaine or Chris Angel.
Just imagine if their shtick was that they were actually just legit psychics, like, which I think at least one of those guys claims that, right? Like,
I think one of them claims to be like a mentalist or some shit.
Right.
Like they have like his version of it that you can, so that he can pick and choose what that applies to.
Right. It's very similar, but doesn't have the late 90s, early 2000s edge, you know? So actually a good account of these early days of the like psychic entertainment in Israel can be found in the book, which I didn't know existed, and now I really want to get a copy of, called A Skeptic's Handbook of Parapsychology. It's like 700 pages, and it's a collection of essays edited by a philosopher named Paul Kurtz, and it's just people talking about different figures of parapsychology and their lives and what kinds of stuff. It's a lot of different things. It's like a bunch of different essays, and it's great. But the section on Uri Geller has this to say about the early days of his career that I thought was kind of interesting. So it says, quote, "He followed the same routine employed by other mentalists, such as Kreskin and Dunninger, though with some clever new twists. He would usually begin by asking someone from the audience to write the name of a color on the blackboard, which the audience observed but which Uri presumably could not see. Similarly, he guessed the names of foreign capitals. It is possible to do these tricks with an accomplice in the audience, providing the proper signals have been prearranged, or it can be done merely by finding an opportunity to quickly peek at the blackboard where the words are written. Next, Uri would bend or break metal objects, razors, keys, nails, or spoons, by sleight of hand or make stopped watches go again. All of these tricks can be easily duplicated by magicians without any pretense that they are supernormal." So the skeptics, the magicians, claim that they can do all this same stuff that he does. So the amazing Randy claims in his book that Uri did indeed have such an accomplice with him to perform these two-person code tricks with the audience. That would be Shippy Strang, his friend from
so
camp.
he's got the plant. Okay.
Yeah, and another really weird thing is in the documentary, like we're going to get there shortly, there's a part where there's like a brief clip of Uri like hanging out after he first arrives in the United States. And there's another guy there who I think actually might be Shippy. But he does not get mentioned in the it's just interesting to me what things Uri Geller, when he talks in that documentary, but I read about online and in books, he just doesn't bring up. He just straight up no longer talks about it. So,
you know, after a while, you start to selectively choose your life and edit your life, you know?
Yes. Well, that's the interesting thing here, because check this out. After Uri's career in entertainment kicked off, Shippy was working alongside him. I kind of got this impression that he may have helped develop some of the show with Uri. And Randy also says that while these performances were popular with people in Israel, it also got the two of them into trouble with the law.
Oh, really?
Yes. So they had peppered in this psychokinesis story in their acts when they were performing around Israel and in the kibbutzes. But this apparently led to their being served by the court for misleading their audiences. It seemed Israeli, for whatever reason, the Israeli court may have had a problem with these two using the terms like psychokinesis, ESP, and parapsychology as a means to promote their act, since they were doing what was essentially basic magic tricks. And Randy claims...
So they're basically getting yelled at for false advertising?
Yes, straight up.
Okay.
So Randy claims that after their legal trouble, they no longer use these terms in their acts in Israel. Now, Uri doesn't like this part of Randy's book, and he has a section on his website that is titled An Apology from James Randi. And here's what it says. Quote, Randy had to instruct his publishers to place an erratum in his book. The following are the misleading statements which I found in Randy's book. On page 9, 7 lines from the bottom by using the words brought to court. This suggested that myself, Uri Geller, and Shippy Strang were physically taken to court, which was not the case. A legal action was brought against me, with the judge accepting on behalf of the court an amount of money sent in anonymously, which settled the charge. Then, on page 198, line 24, it should state charged through the courts, and a settlement was made in favor of the plaintiff. Page 215 in paragraph 3, reference. I, Uri Geller, was not technically tried in a court of law and convicted, but was charged through the courts, with a settlement being made. The plaintiff in this case had charged that I, Uri Geller, was performing tricks rather than producing paranormal feats. The judge awarded the plaintiff only the price he had paid for admission to my show. I shall reproduce, for the purpose of clarity, the complete text of the July 1971 article as it appeared in the Jerusalem Post. So he literally has here what the newspaper said about it. Legerdemain ruled breach of contract, Beersheba. The magistrate's court here yesterday upheld charges that Uri Geller, the self-proclaimed telepathist, was guilty of breach of contract in that he promised to perform feats of telepathy, parapsychology, hypnotism, and telekinesis, while in fact he merely employed sleight of hand and stage tricks. Geller was ordered to foot costs of £20 and to repay the plaintiff, Uri Goldstein, a mechanical engineering student at the University of the Negev, the £750 Goldstein had paid for a ticket to one of Uri Geller's performances. The court ruled with the plaintiff that Geller's performance, in contrast to his advertised promises, constituted a breach of the contract defined by the purchase of a ticket to the performance. Okay, great. What I find so funny about this is that it's like not only sort of buried on his website under an actual like tab that says legal issues.
Okay.
But it also just kind of still affirms what Randy is trying to say here, right? Like, he's just saying Uri Geller's performances in Israel were sleight of hand and stage tricks. No telepathy or psychokinesis was performed, which, again, that sort of goes against what Uri Geller himself and some of the true believers that follow him have claimed.
Yeah. That's
so, yeah.
Fun to put that on your website.
It's just, it's funny. And the thing is, I don't want to jump too far ahead. We're going to talk about Uri Geller's legal issues in the final part.
Okay.
Because what I just mentioned, there's a whole back and forth between him and the amazing Randy and a legal battle. So we'll get into that. So,
all right.
Interestingly, his stint as a performer in Israel is pretty glossed over in the documentary that I watched, which, if you remember, that's called The Secret Life of Uri Geller. I found it on Vimeo. I don't think it exists anywhere else. I even tried to find it on the actual like official BBC website, and it's just like not accessible. So if you can't make it accessible to me, then I'm going to go find it for free somewhere. So it mentions him basically being a breakout hit, but then pretty much moves on to Geller's lifestyle of like schmoozing with influential people and important IDF and Mossad figures. Apparently he's good friends with noted war criminal monster Benjamin Netanyahu, who claims to have witnessed one of Geller's so-called psychic shows when Geller was doing what was effectively a stint of performing for the troops.
He did like an ISO type tour for Israelis?
Yes.
Okay.
So
of course he did.
So yeah, lucky for him, he wouldn't have to worry about his status as a psychic performer in Israel too much longer, as this one he was quote unquote discovered by Puharich. In the documentary, Uri tells another slightly different story involving Mossad, and Puharich doesn't come up. But in all the accounts of his life outside of the documentary, it was Puharich who sniffed him out and eventually brought him to the U.S. But according to Geller, around this time, he had been brought to a top secret Mossad base where he lectured and demonstrated his abilities to top military brass, including Israeli mystic and scientist Yitzhak Bentov. And supposedly Bentov, who had secretly worked on Israeli rockets, by the way, which I looked this guy up. He kept his work with the Israeli military secret, and he worked on their rockets. And there's this really bizarre thing where he, I think, also partly lived in like Chicago, and he would die in a plane crash. And I don't think this means anything, but I was like astounded. But he died in a plane crash. He has these connections to Mossad and Geller, and then his parents would also die in a plane crash, like before him. And I just, it's just a really like that's a very unfortunate, that's a very unfortunate bloodline ender, which I guess I shouldn't say bloodline ender. He does have a daughter. I don't know why I said that, but he like, what I read was like his daughter.
You went weirdly tradcat there for a second.
I don't know. Well, his daughter like, apparently his daughter like went to learn about him and try and research his life because she had no idea that he was involved with the military, like working on these rockets and stuff for them. Mm-hmm. And he had just kept it secret his entire life. And so like, apparently she wrote a book about him and like was trying to investigate like why that was. And beyond that, I don't know, but it seemed weird. It seemed like a weird story. Yeah. So anyways, So yeah, Bentov, like I said, he apparently wrote to and this is in Uri Geller's words, quote unquote, American scientist about Geller's amazing abilities. Now, this American scientist that Geller won't name in the documentary is confirmed later by the documentarian to be Puharich. But again, Geller does not mention him by name. So Uri claims that the impetus for bringing him to the U.S. was exactly the one that brought the Stanford Research Institute psychical research into being. Namely, the Soviets were already doing it. He just says that's why this happened. However, Puharich's involvement is especially weird, and it makes me wonder if that's the reason Geller does not bring it up in the documentary. I don't quite know how Puharich found out about Uri, but I know that he eventually met him. He like went to Israel to investigate him, and when they would meet, things would take a really fucking weird turn. So Puharich would put Geller under regressive hypnosis, right? I sort of wonder if Geller had told him about his secret Arab garden where he met the alien being thing that like beamed stuff into his brain. And apparently during this regressive hypnosis, Geller would start to reveal his secret origins on planet Earth. So he claimed that his true identity was something called Spectra, and that he was actually a, quote, computer aboard a spaceship from a distant galaxy. And he claimed to be under the control of some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence on a planet called Huva, and that his mission was that he was to be sent to Earth and to sort of mediate with the help of Puharich and sort of intervene on our planet. Now, a science writer named John Wilhelm, after they arrived in the U.S. together, would get to conduct an interview with them. And it's pretty weird. Puharich not only would vouch for Geller as the real deal, like a straight up just he has psychic powers, but he would also get into this bizarre development with Spectra and Huva. And in the interview, he claims that both he and Uri were in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence and that Uri may be some sort of channeling medium of this intelligence.
Oh, sure.
So,
all right.
Yeah. Purich would go so far as to claim that when Geller channeled these intelligences, he would acquire a, quote, trans voice, a computer synthesized voice.
Oh, so he means like in the Neil Young album trans way,
Yes.
not in... Okay.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
yes. So Purich claimed that while Geller was around, bizarre things would happen as well, such as jamming radars, computers would go haywire, car motors would shut themselves off inexplicably and spontaneously, and this was merely due to the presence of Geller. The account of Purich and Geller developing this bizarre story of alien channeling is summarized again pretty well in A Skeptic's Handbook of Parapsychology, but I'd like to read a couple snippets from that book that talk about their time together because I find it very interesting. So here's what it says, quote, Geller seemed at times to wish to distance himself from some of Purich's speculative ideas. Yet, he also went along with the story. Thus, Geller related that there were several instances in which he and Purich witnessed UFOs. As with vanishing tapes, no one else could corroborate their account. One night, Geller rushed from his Tel Aviv apartment, taking Purich and a female friend with him. Driving into the suburbs, Geller stopped the car. He saw flashing blue lights in the distance. Cautioning the others not to accompany him, he approached the lights just behind a dip in the terrain. After a few minutes, Geller returned carrying Purich's pen, which, according to Purich, had mysteriously, quote-unquote, dematerialized a few days earlier. Geller also relates an incredible story that one day he teleported himself virtually instantaneously from the streets of Manhattan some 30 miles north to Purich's home in Ossining, New York, coming right through the upper portion of the screamed porch. Uri claimed that he didn't think the powers that he evinced were coming from him, but that they were being channeled through him. What I am able to do, he confides, is maybe part of a much greater plan which concerns more than the earth and mankind. So here's my read of the Purich thing.
Okay.
It does hinge on the fact that I will, again, say Uri Geller's a fucking fraud, in my opinion. And I feel like this guy was a bona fide parapsychologist, believer in the paranormal, in the supernatural, and all this stuff, this Purich guy, and came into contact with Uri Geller after he heard about him, went into research him. And I think that Uri Geller was already kind of like, you know, just look at how it landed, like when he like tried to assert that he was a true blue psychic when he was doing these Israel tours or whatever, you know, like, I think that he just recognized that he could take this guy's belief in him and use it, you know, but also like kind of like, you know, yeah, okay, aliens, sure, definitely, I'm definitely into that. And because later when he doesn't fucking talk about this stuff anymore, and I forget, it's I think in the same book, but he basically is quoted later as saying like, you know, oh, you know, you have to remember I was under hypnotic regression, I was very suggestive, and you know, I don't know if I subscribe to everything that Purich says about me, but I do think there's maybe a possibility that alien intelligence is linked to the origins of my psychic powers, which is cool and all, but then again also like contradicts things that he would say later, which is, for instance, he claims to believe that everybody has latent psychic ability that they can tap into. I mean, I guess it doesn't straight up contradict it but you know, it's like, okay, do you get your psychic powers from aliens, or does everybody have the ability to be a psychic, or is it both? It's just weird, and it just sounds like
Kyle, it's like buying software. You buy the disc, but then the aliens have to give you the activation code.
Of course,
you know?
Exactly. That's fair. Okay, I hadn't considered that. Thank you. So with his growing popularity and the endorsement of parapsychologists like Purich, Geller began to get noticed, and this being noticed, I should say like more worldwide, this being noticed would also be done by the scientific community, because the natural question popped up, is this guy the genuine article, or is he tricking people? So certain folks wanted to test Geller. Now, he would also have these like early 70s television appearances, especially in Britain, where he would become like a superstar. Like the 70s is where he really popped off. So the way Geller tells it in the documentary is a little, again, it feels a little different. He basically says that a high-ranking CIA official caught wind of Geller's bullshit and wanted in on it. He obviously doesn't say it like that, but he's like, since the Russians were already investigating psychokinesis, they want somebody like Geller on their side. They feel behind. And he says that the letter written by Itzhak Bentov to that so-called American scientist who Uri Geller doesn't name must have somehow landed at the CIA at some point, and they knew they needed Geller in their corner. Which, again, Bentov was writing to Puharich. So to make things weirder, former CIA officer Dr. Kit Green basically confirms this story. In the documentary and a number of articles, Dr. Green lays out how he found out about Geller and what transpired with the green lighting of Project Stargate. So here's what he says. Quote, "One afternoon, I got a telephone call at my desk in the headquarters building. And the phone call initially was on what we call the Red Line, a classified line. It was an intelligence agency of a very powerful ally of the United States of America, and they were troubled because a member of their military, an enlisted man, was doing things for them that they couldn't understand that appeared to have an electromagnetic aspect. He was capable of altering highly sophisticated electronics, which included imaging electronics at will, and they didn't know how he was doing it. The question was simply, can you help us? My response initially was, of course, I'll be glad to try. I was very interested as an electrophysiologist and neurophysiologist, not as a physician initially, and that was what I was initially asked about. The word psychic didn't appear for a long time with Geller."
Okay.
So a number of months after this call, Geller would be brought to the Stanford Research Institute for testing. And this was, of course, the same project being conducted by Puthoff and Targ, among others. And while Geller seems reluctant to drop Puharich's name, the documentarian does say that it was Puharich who then contacted Edgar Mitchell. Do you recognize that name, Niall?
Yeah. That was in the not the first Uri episode, but the other episode, right?
Maybe. I actually don't remember if I mentioned him in that, but
where's that name?
Well,
from?
so
Why is that familiar?
Edgar Mitchell was an astronaut who was on Apollo 14, and he is the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Oh, okay.
So Edgar Mitchell himself will say in the documentary and in other places that he was very interested in so-called mental phenomenon, which would mean like telepathy, psychokinesis, ESP, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And after he had returned from his moon trip, Puharich contacted Mitchell to tell him all about the amazing feats of Uri Geller. And this piqued Mitchell's curiosity, and so he arranged for his travel to the U.S. And Mitchell was, I don't know exactly what the relationship was, but Mitchell was somehow in relationship collaborating with the Stanford Research Institute, which, it's like an independent research facility, but they did a lot of government and military research and contracts and stuff. So what this ended up doing is it would basically not only serve to get Geller into the hands of the scientists at SRI, Puthoff and Targ and those guys, but it would also effectively hide the CIA's interest in both Uri and the psychical research at SRI, because Mitchell at the time had no idea that the work that he was collaborating on there was also being funded by the CIA. So this was all an attempt to just be like, let's get Geller in the States, let's get our guys on him to test him, but let's make sure it stays far away from the CIA, who I think were somehow just aware of the correspondence between Puharich and the Israeli military guy.
Gotcha.
Because again, the U.S. the CIA and Mossad and Israeli and U.S. intelligence are very commingling, especially nowadays. So it's not totally surprising that they would find out about this.
Yeah.
And it does kind of lend credence to the idea that Uri Geller did have a relationship with Mossad, which we're going to get into in part 3. But what that relationship isn't totally clear. So they literally, in the documentary, the only thing they ever say about it, like they say a bunch of stuff about it without saying stuff about it. You know what I mean? And the only like suggestion that you get of like what they specifically did with him is that he was used for operational things. But they didn't have the time to conduct like scientific research on him. So there's a point where the CIA and Mossad are like trying to maybe exchange a bit there, like and there's like concerns that actually Uri Geller is a Mossad spy on the CIA, like spying on the United States.
Oh, okay.
We'll get into that. But that's like that's why this is such a weird this little section here is kind of weird and missing a couple pieces, but we'll come back to it. So during the early stages of the experiments with Geller at SRI, Puthoff and Targ were quickly impressed with his abilities. I would like to remind everybody here that Puthoff and a couple other people involved at SRI they were Scientologists. And Scientology sort of presupposes a whole bunch of psychic bullshit phenomena. So I think it's pretty safe to say that a number of people involved in these experiments were way past ready to believe. So
yeah, they were. It's not wild that these people were really believing in Uri Geller's abilities.
These aren't like laymen who are like astonished, but who are like, I'm just your good old guy who has, these are people who are already ready to believe in psychic and phenomena, among other things. So, but because these guys were like, I guess, so impressed, they would reach out to their CIA contact, who was Dr. Green. And in the documentary, Dr. Green describes his first interactions over the phone with Geller after he picked up another call from his special intelligence phone. So phone rings and he answers it, and here's what he says happens. Quote, "It was the chief scientist at SRI, and he was talking about other aspects of Uri Geller's capabilities. I, of course, said, well, what other kinds of things are you talking about? And without much of a pause, the scientist said, well, he says he can see things at a distance. And I said, no, he can't. And they said, yes, he can, and he's right here. So I said, hi, Uri. Well, what can you see? And he goes on and basically says, Uri doesn't know that this is a CIA contact. They're just telling him it's an interested colleague from somewhere else.
Okay.
And he goes on to say, I turned and picked up a book, a collection of medical illustrations of the nervous system, and I opened it up to a page and I just stared at it. And Uri said, oh, I'm seeing something kind of strange. So according to Dr. Green, Geller would make a drawing based off of what he was seeing through Dr. Green. And he would like crumple it up, toss it, and then start over again, and then doodle something on the page very intently until he said, well, I don't know what to think. It looks like I have made a drawing of a pan of scrambled eggs, yet I have the word architecture coming in strong. Now, Dr. Green was shocked because the story goes that the page of the book that he had randomly landed on and stared at, that he was trying to get Uri Geller to see, was a cross-section of a human brain, which it's kind of like a scrambled eggs type of thing. But this wasn't the thing that amazed Dr. Green the most, he claims. He says, quote, but what caught my attention was that I had written across the top of his drawing the words, architecture of a viral infection. I had been looking at the biological warfare effect on the nervous system of a threat virus. So, according to this story, Uri Geller was able to see the page, get an impression of the cross-section of a brain, and the word architecture from the thing that he had written down. Supposedly.
I guess this has made me think about something I've never really considered with remote viewing before.
Yeah.
And that is like how much it is on the remote viewer to be able to identify anything. Mm-hmm. Because like if you say like a scrambled eggs kind of thing, sure, I guess that could be a cross section of a brain.
Yeah.
But that if you just tell me scrambled eggs of a thing and I don't have the thing to look at, then that's not going to get me to brain diagram. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, the more you get into the remote viewing experiments and stuff, like, you can find some moments where, like, people kind of get prompted a little bit too. Like, it's so shaky. And frankly,
yeah.
As far as a CIA person coming out to blatantly say, this guy's psychic powers work, I just don't believe the words out of an ex-CIA person's mouth. Like,
oh, for
at
sure.
all.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I just don't believe it. And so yeah, it's a weird, it's so weird. And there is, I guess the way I sort of view all of this is that once this stuff was declassified and people started paying attention to it and like trying to figure out what the angle of the CIA was when they did all this research into this stuff, I just kind of get the impression that like people, you know, obviously there's the weird Scientology angle in all of this and people making a bunch of money off of it, which is its own thing. But just like as far as the CIA's interest in stuff goes, it's like, I just feel like now that it's declassified, people are like, oh my God, the CIA did what? And the CIA is like, oh, people are paying attention to that thing that yielded no results whatsoever. And a bunch of Scientologists were fooled into thinking that psychic abilities exist. Yeah, let's push that. People should think about that and really focus on it. You know, like
the thing that I feel like people don't always remember is like when you're operating with the budget of the US military, the like margin of error of like, oh, that's worth throwing $500,000, $2 million at whatever the fuck, just to like to do some research into it, see if it gives us anything. If it doesn't do anything, then who gives a fuck? It's just like 2 years and $2 million. No one, that's nothing. So like, yeah, like you're saying, this was inconsequential in terms of things the military has looked into, but because it got declassified, people are like, oh my God, you looked into this weird thing? And they're like, yeah, sure, focus on that instead of like the kind of fucked up shit that we did.
And it's like, yeah, this whole thing, at least in this story, this impromptu experiment, I guess all of this is so incredible to Dr. Green that it's sort of claimed that this is what ultimately convinces him to greenlight what would become Project Stargate, which was like a $20 million project, I want to say, which again, to a normal person, that's like, holy shit, that's insane. That's an insane amount of money that we put into this. Like, clearly it means something, even though it, like you said, does not have to mean something at all. We can literally shit out millions of dollars and just like waste it on stuff. We do it all the time. But I also think too, it's like so much of like Scientology stuff revolves around money. And that angle of it too is like really fucking weird to me, that these people were making so much money on what, you know, if you peel it back enough, was ultimately nothing. Yeah, it's all ridiculous. And Uri Geller, of course, is just, he's a showman who's trying to make money off of convincing people. And like, he has been so thoroughly debunked over and over that it's like, but he still has a fucking mansion.
Yeah.
And he's still getting calls from Mossad, apparently. It's a whole, I don't know. So I don't want to get too deep into that right now, because that's going to be in our next episode. We're going to do a brief overview of the tests that were conducted on Geller at SRI, because like, we've kind of covered the kind of shit that they did at SRI. It's not really the interesting thing about all this, in my opinion. But I'll briefly go over it because there's a couple that people will always point to with Geller specifically. But then we'll talk about Geller's life after SRI, these weird CIA and Mossad connections, and of course, we're going to talk about the amazing Randy debunking him and Geller's weird legal trouble with Pokemon and Randy. So that's going to be part 3.
Hell yeah. All right.
So yeah,
I love that we're
thanks
going to
for
get
joining
into
me
the
for part
debunking.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like sometimes I don't find the debunking thing that important to bring to the table for these episodes, but it really depends on the topic. And I think here it's so like vital to the identity of Uri Geller as we know him and all these weird debunking battles that he had, that like I think we got to go through it because it's very fun and interesting. It's not usually fun to be like the UFO was a flare like that, you know. But here I think this is pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, Niall.
Yep.
That's part 2. Part 3 is going to come up next week. Are you ready for a big question?
Oh, always.
Okay. I have a simple one for you this week.
All right. Hey, like you said at the beginning of the episode, keep it simple, stupid.
That's right. And that's been, now let me kind of talk to you here.
Okay. Yeah.
Which by no means is like me pausing to make sure I didn't already do this big question. I just want to kind of talk a little.
Oh yeah. No, like just check up what are you up to this weekend?
We talked about how much you, what am I? Oh, I was going to keep talking
go ahead.
about like something sort of related, but you like magic, yeah?
Like the
stage magic?
Oh, yeah, vaguely. Yeah, I'm it on occasion.
Okay. Now, what do you stop me if I asked you this question before?
Fair enough.
Because I can't remember. What would your stage name be as a psychic magician and why?
I can't remember you asking me this question. Man, okay, coming up with a name. What good magician names haven't been used? Holy shit. All right.
They've all been used.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem, right? Like the Amazing Randy. I was gonna say, oh, I'm the Amazing Kyle, but then I like did a double take and I was like, oh fuck, that guy already kind of did it, right? Like
yeah. It's one of those things. It's like trying to start a new podcast where you just have to Google the name first on a couple different places just to see if it's already in use. Man. So I guess where you have to start is, do you actually want your name in it? Do you want, or should I pick a full-blown nom de plume? Because
you can, hey, look, that's up to you. That is open to interpretation. Because like I could be the awesome Kyle or the amazing Kyle or the magical Kyle or the Kyle who performs tricks.
Or you could just be
I could be
like Jeff, just mononym. I think here's the thing. Much like if a person
Jeff is performing at the Luxor.
Exactly. Imagine it's like that one friend of yours that you had like back before this was too common, who just named their dog like Randy or something.
Right.
And it's so fun and like, oh, you just gave them a normal person's name. That's fun. So like imagine most people go with like big fucking, Chris Angel's the mind freak, there's that whole thing. So what if it's just like Jeff? Is that my actual name? No, but that is.
And you can get up on the stage and say, my name is Jeff. As your,
you know what? Maybe we should throw this whole idea out the fucking window on fire first. Oh man. No, I'm going to stick with it. It's better than some other things that I could have, some other rabbit holes I could have gone down.
Okay.
I'm going for simple mononym.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Now I might go around the other way and say, what if I was like Aragoth the Demented?
Okay. Yeah.
And like I get up and I'm like dressed in robes and I have like a really evil vibe. But once you get to know me on stage, I'm kind of like a cool guy.
Yeah.
And
you're like a chill hang.
Yeah. But despite that really intense name, I think it would be kind of cool to like have people kind of like on the edge of their seats, like, oh shit, Aragoth's coming and he's fucking demented. What's he gonna do? And then I come out and I'm like, oh, I can force like Jax to the top of the deck, isn't it?
Yeah, I can pull a quarter from behind your ear. Isn't that wild? Aragoth, the fucking unknown. Because like I never actually said the full blown why. I realized you did ask me why, and it's purely just so I can put billboards up that just in full impact font on a white billboard just says Jeff.
Yeah, and you're just like it's just the name Jeff, just huge impact font, and in front of the name is just an image of you, just kind of sheepishly like hands at your side, like, yeah, that's me, I'm Jeff.
Yeah,
that's my stage name.
Exactly.
What you gonna do?
And so like Aragoth, what was your, sorry,
Demented.
Demented. What's your
Yeah.
billboard looking like?
It's gonna look like a cattle decapitation.
Oh, okay.
Album cover.
Yeah.
So,
hammer smash face or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, it's gonna be like fucking crazy ass metal cover, and then you're gonna go to my show, and they're gonna be like, well, there's not a lot about. Actually, maybe this would be disappointing for certain people, but
we're both just basically trying to do false advertising and get Uri Geller.
Yeah, well, that's what he did. So I'm just kind of following in his footsteps. I don't know.
Yeah.
Good, great. Look forward to the Aragoth and Jeff double bill.
Yeah, we're going on a co-headlining tour.
Yeah, we're gonna be performing at the place that Elvis was locked into.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make a mic disappear down my throat.
If you guys haven't seen that, go ahead and go to YouTube, look up Elvis Eats Mike or Swallows Mike. Not Mike,
right?
Which was his stage name at the time, but Mic.
Yeah. Oh man.
So, Niall, are you ready for some?
Oh, I so am. So if you want to find us on social media, you can follow us on X or Twitter at IGW Podcast.
Just call it Twitter.
I don't know why I slipped.
Nobody
I've been
calls
doing
it
it
X.
perfectly up until now, and it slipped, and it's not going to happen again. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. I forgive you. You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And you can follow us on all your favorite podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. The last stream I did where I was playing Pokemon Emerald, we actually had a person show up who was like, hey, I was listening to the latest episode, and you mentioned your stream, and here you are. And I was like, holy shit, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
So come and check out our stream. We're streaming on there. We're playing right now. I am playing through Pokemon Emerald, which has been a lot of fun. We get a lot of Twitch chat people who listen to the show there. And then email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. This week, email us about your magician stage name.
Yeah.
What you would name yourself and why. Think long and hard about that and let us know.
And bonus points if you know what your billboard looks like.
Yes, definitely. Patreon.com/ItGetsWeird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to the show It Gets Weird TV, where right now we are covering season 2 of The X-Files. You get to vote on what show we watch on that show. It's going to be some weird thing that's sort of in our wheelhouse. And we get together and discuss the show. So yeah, right now watching The X-Files season 2. It's been great. We also have a $5 tier where you get access to It Gets Weird TV, and then in the off weeks you get another bonus episode. And so you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to the Discord where we're all hanging out chatting about all kinds of stuff: Bigfoot, UFOs, conspiracies, spirits, everything. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Here's a tip. Thanks for doing what you do. Appreciate you guys. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thanks, you all, for listening. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I'll see you in part 3 of Uri Geller next week.
Peace.